event today. My name is Jonathan Ellis. I'm Policy Development Director at the Refugee Council, and what I'm going to try and do over the next half an hour or so is really set the context of where we find ourselves today in 2010 in terms of the policy context, in terms of asylum. And what I'm going to endeavour to do is really compare where we were in 1948 with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and just take a few of those articles and compare where we find ourselves today. Because I think just doing that, I think, is quite sobering. Just to say a few words about my organisation before we start. I think we're an interesting organisation. We strive to be an independent charity with a twofold mandate. One is to deliver services to refugees and asylum seekers, and secondly, and very importantly, to campaign and lobby on their behalf. We're a national organisation, we're the membership organisation for the refugee sector in this country. And it's been my privilege to be policy director there for 3 years, where I lead our research, our policy, our campaigning work, but also, very importantly, our work supporting refugee community organisations. I know in this region, in the East Midlands, Refugee Action does a lot of really excellent work as well, supporting RCOs, refugee community organisations. And really I want to use my talk, and no apologies for not using PowerPoint. I'm running a one-man campaign at the moment against PowerPoint, so hopefully you're going to have to listen, and hopefully I can make myself clear in terms of the sentiments that I want to express today. But essentially I want to look at human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In Nimish's excellent presentation made reference to the 10th of December 1948, a defining day in the history of this globe, where after the horrors of the Second World War, the nations of the world came together with a sense of never again should this happen again, and coming together in what does it mean to be human, what are those truly universal rights. And I just want to take a few of the articles from that defining declaration. And starting with Article 1, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. What a wonderful article. And it just made me think in terms of dignity. Every morning I get the press clippings, national and local media, and the vitriol and abuse that is directed towards asylum seekers and migrants. No sense to tell the story. Is that treating people with dignity? We had in this country a huge backlog, didn't we? A huge legacy of cases, the so-called case resolution cases. And we had a wonderful human being who volunteered in our offices, who had to wait 9 years for her asylum application to get 9 years. Her life was put on hold from her late 20s into her 30s. Her life was put on hold. Is that treating someone with dignity? The denial of the right to work. I'll say a bit more about that. But denying people the fundamental right to be productive, to use their skills and experiences, denying asylum seekers the right to work. Is that treating people with dignity? The rights of women, I think, hugely important. I think women who come to this country seeking asylum, seeking sanctuary, I think are in a very vulnerable position. I think they have particular rights and expectations, and I commend the work that Asylum Aid has done, our sister charity, with their Refugee Women's Charter. Absolutely brilliant piece of work of how we should be treating women who come to this country, particularly the importance on female caseovers. Very important. Basic stuff, but very, very important. You know, treating people with dignity. Does that always happen? And the issue of mourning raids. You know, families that have reached the end of the process, and the UK border agency decide it's time that they let them to go, and they swoop, don't they, at 5 in the morning and rip them out of their homes. And interestingly, you may have seen in the press, the UK border agency chief inspector did an independent report on mourning raids. If you haven't seen it, have a look. Damning, I think, damning, in terms of not treating people with dignity and setting key standards. Oh yes, people will need to be removed when they reach the end of process. We accept that. But how do you do it with dignity? How do you do it with dignity if and when they've had a fair hearing? Article 2, everyone is entitled to all the rights set out in the Declaration without distinction of national or social origin, birth or other status. Yeah? Regardless of where you come from, you've got these rights. And this made me think of accommodation dispersal in this country. Since 2000, asylum seekers have been dispersed to the four corners of the UK. Some of the accommodation that individuals are sent to is really appalling. You know, not the tabloid media, you know, the mansions that you might read about, but really appalling accommodation. Not always, but sometimes. The fact that asylum seekers live on 70% of income support, 70% of the nationally agreed poverty threshold. They're not allowed to work. Since late last year, we've had a new way, haven't we, of supporting asylum seekers at the end of process. They got rid of vouchers, remember the supermarket vouchers, saw in your pack information about a brilliant voucher exchange scheme. We campaigned against the voucher scheme, saying that it stigmatised asylum seekers. The border agency brought in a payment card. We suspended judgment. We've now got evidence. We'll release a report in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. It's a damning indictment of asylum seekers being stigmatised because of a separate card. Why do we create this parallel structure? Why do we encourage discrimination? In our report, 1/3 of respondents had received hostility from either shop workers or other shoppers. You know, why do we do this? In terms of equal rights, detention, you know, we made reference to detention earlier, you know, detaining children. Coalition government have made a powerful statement in their coalition agreement that they will end the detention of children for immigration purposes. Fantastic. Brilliant. Great. But it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet, you know. And if we say that the detention of children is harmful, why is it still happening? And just make a reference in terms of treating people without distinction, how we treat people engaged in same-sex relationships, and the difficulty so many people seeking refugee status have trying to explain really their own status in terms of their sexual relations. And again, I commend the campaign that Refugee Action is running at the moment around actually helping people and supporting people in that arrangement. So treating people with decent rights without distinction. Article 3 says everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of person, to life and liberty. And it made me think around access to legal support. You know, when we talk to our clients, we say, if we could do one thing to help you whilst you seek refugee status, what would that one thing be? And almost without exception they say, decent legal support. If you could do one thing to help us. And the recent demise of refugee and migrant justice was a catastrophe for this country. The largest charitable provider of decent legal support out. Where do individuals go who need that decent legal support? You know, the importance of having a fair hearing. There's been a brilliant project you may know about in Solihull, in the West Midlands, where Asylum Aid and other charities convinced the border agency to front load. Have you ever heard the verb to front load? I'm sure that doesn't exist, but to invest early in decent legal support, so everybody got decent legal representation. What was amazing about that short pilot was that the lawyers were happier, the Home Office officials were happier, and the individual asylum seekers were happier. You know, get the right decision right first time. So important. And in terms of right to life, the issue of destitution. That quaint Victorian word that we use for some bizarre reason to describe people who have nothing. No income, no benefits, no home, no nothing. We did a survey with the asylum support agencies last year that found that 48% of the people we see day in, day out are destitute, have nothing. A more recent report came out in June this year, quite awesome report by the British Red Cross. I don't know whether you've seen it, in terms of the impact on individuals of having nothing. No home, no benefits, no income. We're the 5th largest economy in the world, yet we still have people in this country without anything. Is that right to life? And Article 9. No one should be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Before the election, there was huge debate, wasn't there, about 42-day detention without trial. Yeah? Was that an erosion of our civil liberties? In this country, people can be detained indefinitely because of their immigration status. And I commend the work of the London Detainee Support Group. Brilliant, brilliant charity that has done active campaigning on this issue. Marvellous report called Detained Lives that told the individual story of people who were locked up for over 12 months, locked up, not knowing how long they'll be detained. And their only crime is to have sought asylum, to have sought safety in this country. And I think that has to change. Article 13 says that everyone has a right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to their country. Powerful statement. And of course the critical thing with people seeking asylum, seeking refugee status, is that they can't return. They're forced to flee and they can't return. And I think in our narrative, we have to talk and describe and re-emphasize that point. People cannot return. Article 14 says everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from protection. Article 14 has the right to enjoy. Whether enjoy is the right verb, that's a quite legalistic use of the verb to enjoy, I think. It is becoming increasingly more difficult to get into Europe, let alone Britain, to seek safety. Increasingly more difficult. So 2 years ago, with UNHCR, we did a report called Remote Controls, which is based on a 3-week field trip to Turkey, where we looked at the reality for our clients coming from Asia, North Africa, through Turkey into Europe, and the huge difficulties in the way that they're treated within Turkey, and the extension of extraterritorial border controls by the UK government into Turkey. As we tighten and tighten our borders, and as a citizen of this country I want to be safe, so I'm not going to advocate no borders. I want to be safe in this country, but the borders have to be what we say protection sensitive. They have to be sufficiently porous to allow people in to make their claim under the 1951 Convention. Our fear, and it's a huge challenge for politicians in 2010, is how do you create genuinely protection-sensitive borders? The focus seems to be exclusively on secure borders. We have a UK border agency. Where does protection come into that? That has to be there. And I think also my organisation, Refugee Council, and others, we have to be better at telling the story of why people come to this country for asylum, for refuge, for safety. We have not been good at it. We need to be better at it. When we did our strategic review 3 years ago, staff, volunteers, clients said, you must be better. Tell the story. I mean, journalistically, the asylum story is the most amazing story. We need to tell that story more. And, you know, the last government